英語聞き流し10分間、名作リスニング、英語テキストと MP3 ダウンロード、その他の物語は、ホームページよりご利用いただけます。88thpp.com 88thpp.com
His heart was breaking. He fell ill. For 3 days he remained in the wagon, with a coverlet over him, fighting a fever, and seeing no one except the capataz, who came to give him his drink and feel his pulse. And then he believed that he was lost, and invoked his mother in despair, calling her 100 times by name, "Oh my mother! My mother! Help me! Come to me, for I am dying! Oh, my poor mother, I shall never see you again! My poor mother, who will find me dead beside the way!" And he folded his hands over his bosom and prayed. Then he grew better, thanks to the care of the capataz, and recovered, but with his recovery arrived the most terrible day of his journey, the day on which he was to be left to his own devices. They had been on the way for more than 2 weeks, when they arrived at the point where the road to Tucumán parted from that which leads to Santiago del Toro. The capataz announced to him that they must separate. He gave him some instructions with regard to the road, tied his bag on his shoulders in a manner which would not annoy him as he walked, and, breaking off short, as though he feared that he should be affected, he bade him farewell. The boy had barely time to kiss him on one arm. The other men, too, who had treated him so harshly, seemed to feel a little pity at the sight of him left thus alone, and they made signs of farewell to him as they moved away. And he returned the salute with his hand, stood watching the convoy until it was lost to sight in the red dust of the plain, and then set out sadly on his road. One thing, on the other hand, comforted him a little from the first. After all those days of travel across that endless plain, which was forever the same, he saw before him a chain of mountains very high and blue, with white summits, which reminded him of the Alps, and gave him the feeling of having drawn near to his own country once more. They were the Andes, the dorsal spine of the American continent, that immense chain which extends from Tierra del Fuego to the glacial sea of the Arctic Pole, through 110 degrees of latitude. And he was also comforted by the fact that the air seemed to him to grow constantly warmer, and this happened, because, in ascending towards the north, he was slowly approaching the tropics. At great distances apart there were tiny groups of houses with a petty shop, and he bought something to eat. He encountered men on horseback. Every now and then he saw women and children seated on the ground, motionless and grave, with faces entirely new to him, of an earthen hue, with oblique eyes and prominent cheekbones, who looked at him intently, and accompanied him with their gaze, turning their heads slowly like automatons. They were Indians. The first day he walked as long as his strength would permit, and slept under a tree. On the second day he made considerably less progress, and with less spirit. His shoes were dilapidated, his feet wounded, his stomach weakened by bad food. Towards evening he began to be alarmed. He had heard, in Italy, that in this land there were serpents. He fancied that he heard them crawling. He halted, then set out on a run, and with cold chills in all his bones. At times he was seized with a profound pity for himself, and he wept silently as he walked. Then he thought, "Oh, how much my mother would suffer if she knew that I am afraid." And this thought restored his courage. Then, in order to distract his thoughts from fear, he meditated much of her. He recalled to mind her words when she had set out from Genoa, and the movement with which she had arranged the coverlet beneath his chin when he was in bed, and when he was a baby, for every time that she took him in her arms, she said to him, "Stay here a little while with me," and thus she remained for a long time, with her head resting on his, thinking. And he said to himself, "Shall I see thee again, dear mother? Shall I arrive at the end of my journey, my mother?" And he walked on and on, among strange trees, vast plantations of sugarcane, and fields without end, always with those blue mountains in front of him, which cut the sky with their exceedingly lofty crests. 4 days, 5 days, a week, passed. His strength was rapidly declining, his feet were bleeding. Finally, one evening at sunset, they said to him, "Tucumán is 50 miles from here." He uttered a cry of joy, and hastened his steps, as though he had, in that moment, regained all his lost vigor. But it was a brief illusion. His forces suddenly abandoned him, and he fell upon the brink of a ditch, exhausted. But his heart was beating with content. The heaven, thickly sown with the most brilliant stars, had never seemed so beautiful to him. He contemplated it, as he lay stretched out on the grass to sleep, and thought that, perhaps, at that very moment, his mother was gazing at him. And he said, "Oh my mother, where art thou? What art thou doing at this moment? Dost thou think of thy son? Dost thou think of thy Marco, who is so near to thee?" Poor Marco! If he could have seen in what a case his mother was at that moment, he would have made a superhuman effort to proceed on his way, and to reach her a few hours earlier. She was ill in bed, in a ground-floor room of a lordly mansion, where dwelt the entire Mequines family. The latter had become very fond of her, and had helped her a great deal. The poor woman had already been ailing when the engineer Mequines had been obliged unexpectedly to set out far from Buenos Aires, and she had not benefited at all by the fine air of Cordova. But then, the fact that she had received no response to her letters from her husband, nor from her cousin, the presentiment, always lively, of some great misfortune, the continual anxiety in which she had lived, between the parting and staying, expecting every day some bad news, had caused her to grow worse out of all proportion. Finally, a very serious malady had declared itself, a strangled internal rupture. She had not risen from her bed for a fortnight. A surgical operation was necessary to save her life. And at precisely the moment when Marco was apostrophizing her, the master and mistress of the house were standing beside her bed, arguing with her, with great gentleness, to persuade her to allow herself to be operated on, and she was persisting in her refusal, and weeping. A good physician of Tucumán had come in vain a week before. "No, my dear master," she said, "do not count upon it, I have not the strength to resist, I should die under the surgeon's knife. It is better to allow me to die thus. I no longer cling to life. All is at an end for me. It is better to die before learning what has happened to my family." And her master and mistress opposed, and said that she must take courage, that she would receive a reply to the last letters, which had been sent directly to Genoa, that she must allow the operation to be performed, that it must be done for the sake of her family. But this suggestion of her children only aggravated her profound discouragement, which had for a long time prostrated her, with increasing anguish. At these words she burst into tears. "Oh, my sons! My sons," she exclaimed, wringing her hands, "perhaps they are no longer alive. It is better that I should die also. I thank you, my good master and mistress, I thank you for my heart. But it is better that I should die. At all events, I am certain that I shall not be cured by this operation. Thanks for all your care, my good master and mistress. It is useless for the doctor to come again after tomorrow. I wish to die. It is my fate to die here. I have decided." And they began again to console her, and to repeat, "Don't say that," and to take her hand and beseech her. But she closed her eyes then in exhaustion, and fell into a doze, so that she appeared to be dead. And her master and mistress remained there a little while, by the faint light of a taper, watching with great compassion that admirable mother, who, for the sake of saving her family, had come to die 6,000 miles from her country, to die after having toiled so hard, poor woman. And she was so honest, so good, so unfortunate. Early on the morning of the following day, Marco, bent and limping, with his bag on his back, entered the city of Tucumán, one of the youngest and most flourishing towns of the Argentine Republic. It seemed to him that he beheld again Cordova, Rosario, Buenos Aires. There were the same straight and extremely long streets, the same low white houses, but on every hand there was a new and magnificent vegetation, a perfumed air, a marvelous light, a sky limpid and profound, such as he had never seen even in Italy. As he advanced through the streets, he experienced once more the feverish agitation which had seized on him at Buenos Aires. He stared at the windows and doors of all the houses, he stared at all the women who passed him, with an anxious hope that he might meet his mother. He would have liked to question every one, but did not dare to stop anyone. All the people who were standing at their doors turned to gaze after the poor, tattered, dusty lad, who showed that he had come from afar. And he was seeking, among all these people, a countenance which should inspire him with confidence, in order to direct to its owner that tremendous query, when his eyes fell upon the sign of an inn upon which was inscribed an Italian name. Inside were a man with spectacles, and two women. He approached the door slowly, and summoning up a resolute spirit, he inquired, "Can you tell me, Signor, where the family Mequines is?" "The engineer Mequines?" asked the innkeeper in his turn. "The engineer Mequines," replied the lad in a thread of a voice. "The Mequines family is not in Tucumán," replied the innkeeper. A cry of desperate pain, like that of one who has been stabbed, formed an echo to these words. The innkeeper and the women rose, and some neighbors ran up. "What's the matter? What ails you, my boy?" said the innkeeper, drawing him into the shop and making him sit down. "The deuce! There's no reason for despairing. The Mequines family is not here, but at a little distance off, a few hours from Tucumán." "Where? Where?" shrieked Marco, springing up like one restored to life. 15 miles from here," continued the man, "on the river at Saladillo, in a place where a big sugar factory is being built, and a cluster of houses. Signor Mequines's house is there, every one knows it, you can reach it in a few hours. I was there a month ago, said a youth, who had hastened up at the cry. Marco stared at him with wide-open eyes, and asked him hastily, turning pale as he did so, "Did you see the servant of Signor Mequines, the Italian? The Genoese?" "Yes, I saw her." Marco burst into a convulsive sob, which was half a laugh and half a sob. Then, with a burst of violent resolution, "Which way am I to go?" "Quick, the road. I shall set out instantly. Show me the way." "But it is a day's march," they all told him in one breath. "You are weary, you should rest, you can set out tomorrow." "Impossible. Impossible," replied the lad. "Tell me the way, I will not wait another instant, I shall set out at once, were I to die on the road." On perceiving him so inflexible, they no longer opposed him. "May God accompany you," they said to him. "Look out for the path through the forest. A fair journey to you, little Italian." A man accompanied him outside of the town, pointed out to him the road, gave him some counsel, and stood still to watch him start. At the expiration of a few minutes, the lad disappeared, limping, with his bag on his shoulders, behind the thick trees which lined the road.
英語聞き流し10分間、名作リスニング。英語テキストと MP3 ダウンロード、その他の物語は、ホームページよりご利用いただけます。88thpp.com 88thpp.com